Hello, everyone. I'm Rick Coluccio, and you are listening to the Recruiting EQ podcast, a conversation show which highlights the benefits of using emotional intelligence in recruitment, in sales, in business, in all things post AI world that we live in. And today, I'm happy to have our guest Wes Towers with us. Wes, how's it going?
Really good. Good start to the day. Nice and early for me. Your end of the day, my start of the day. So great to connect.
Absolutely. Yeah. For those of you who are noticing this, we are not actually recording this live, even though you're going to watch this on a live stream or listen to it afterward. And I always love speaking to someone at this time of the day in Australia, West, because as we keep joking, you're in the future for you today. You're a day ahead of me. I'm in the past, haunting you from the past.
I know. You want some stock tips or sports tips? What's your flavor?
Offline, my friend. Offline. Let's do it.
Yes.
Yeah. No, amazing. Yeah. Now that it seems like, is betting or bet apps get legal in Australia everywhere too?
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, it's not a free for all. There's certain parameters, but we do have them for sure.
Yeah, I feel like that was always a big no-no my whole life, growing up in the 80s, 90s. But now it's like they're everywhere. And man, in the US, it's bonkers that you can bet on anything, like anything on a lot of these apps.
Yeah.
Put a lot of money behind it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So if you're in the US and you have some random thing that you can think of that Australians will know ahead of you, you can hack the system and bet on it. You don't have my blessing, but I am saying it's a thing you can do. Well, so let's get to the to the topic at hand then, because we can talk about bet apps all day, I'm sure. But thank you for joining us here, Wes. I would love it if you would just tell the listeners a little bit about who you are, what you do briefly before we dive into our deeper topic.
Sure. So I run a digital agency, Wes Towers, and the company is Uplift 360 here in Australia. So I've been running it for over 20 years now. So it's always been an industry that's evolved super fast. I've always said if I stopped doing what I'm doing and came back in 6 months' time, everything would have changed. But you can imagine the last few years have been hectic with the technology and so on. So the world's evolving. We're adapting as best we can, and it's exciting and terrifying times we're living in.
Yes, exciting and terrifying times. As you can imagine, and as we had a brief chat about this already in the past, I have a million questions for you about all that. But before we go too deep, though, what is, if you'd like to tell the viewers what your niche is, like who are you primarily helping to create these?
Yeah, good point. I should have raised that. The trades and construction industry is who we serve, so industrial brands as well. So yeah, it wasn't always that way. We weren't always niched, but I found the niche by accident, really. Just discovered the majority of our better clients were in that space, and I knew the power of niching, so it kind of found us, and I dug deeper into it. So, and people sometimes think, hey, you must have a trade or construction background to follow that niche, and that's often how people choose a niche. But it was quite the opposite. I'm useless at picking up a hammer or don't know what end of the screwdriver to hold, those sorts of things. But for whatever reason, I relate really well to these kind of businesses, the founder-led businesses, oftentimes practical, pragmatic, down-to-earth people. I guess that's how I am. I try to avoid techie jargon. So I think that's why I relate really well to these people.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that that's an interesting progression. So why don't we segue directly into it then? Like, one of the things I love to start with before we get into lofty concepts of how things are changing and AI and branding and humanity's place and all that. I would love it if you could give us a little bit of your backstory, your career trajectory, like that's brought you here, that's brought us the man we see before us today with Uplift 360.
Yeah, well, it feels like a series of accidents, happy accidents. Oftentimes, even choosing a career path. I mean, websites weren't really a thing back in the 90s. Or there were websites, but it wasn't as if every company had one, or it wasn't really the norm. So choosing a career path, I chose graphic design, multimedia. I love the creative, but also the technical aspect of that industry, and landed a job in a marketing company in Sydney. And it's to think back how marketing was back then. I mean, as I said, websites weren't really a thing, and certainly social media wasn't a thing. But they won a project to do a website. I don't know how they won it. We only had one computer connected to the internet, a dial-up. You had the email address. You'd have to run over if you're expecting an email and check the one PC connected email or shout across the office, hey, you've got an email, that sort of thing. But yeah, they won a website and said, you're the young guy, better figure out how to do that. So I did, and I found I loved it. The technical and the creative blend, the perfect fit. It's why I chose graphic design, multimedia, not knowing that websites would be the path I took in the end. So yeah, and started my business naively. It feels as though things come together as you make progress. You just start on a path, and even though you're not quite sure exactly where it's going, you just kind of set a direction and see how it goes. You kind of have a vision for what things might be, but there's opportunities along the way. That's certainly how it's felt to me. And started the business naively, had no idea how to run a business, basic things like bookkeeping and proposals. I'd only ever been behind the scenes working in the office, so I had to figure all that stuff out the hard way, and then eventually, as we said, evolved into the niche that we serve now.
And in that evolution, first of all, I'm curious, what prompted you to want to go out on your own and start a company? Like, what was the inspiration moment, if you can remember, that organically brought you to like, you know what, I want to start a business about this?
Yeah, I always thought it would be the natural progression to eventually start my own business, but it came a lot earlier than I thought it would. I was talking to a friend of mine who had tried to start his own agency, and he was just not winning enough work, and he said, I'm throwing in the towel. I'm going to get a real job, as he put it. And I said, well, what are you going to do with your clients? And he only had a couple remaining clients. So it was really not going well at all for him. And he said, well, you can have them. And I took them. So I started a hell of a lot earlier than what I would have, just with those couple of clients. Yeah, so it was a starting point. It really wasn't much at all. I think he had 3 clients, but only 2 that were active still. That third didn't do much at all. So, started way earlier than I would have planned. But it was a great decision because I just started really just me in the evenings to start. The first year or 2, it was just really a freelancing, moonlighting kind of business until I built it up to go full time myself, and then eventually get some team on board as well. So baby steps. It gave me the opportunity to learn on the fly, and all those gaps in my knowledge, I got the chance to fill some of those gaps in. Still feels like I'm filling in gaps, but we're all learning, I suppose.
Well, for sure. And on that topic, can we situate, like, what year was this that you started, just so we could figure out where the journey of tech was at the time that you started the design business?
Yeah. So I started in the industry, that first job, in the year 2000. And then, so I think it might have been 2004 or 5 that I started my own. Must have been 2005 that I started my own business. So yeah, pretty naive to only work for companies for a few years, realistically, and then go start your own. And yeah, websites, because that's a major thing that we do, obviously. They have evolved so fast.
For sure.
Sometimes I bump into an old project we worked on, and I can't believe how we used to do it. There's one website still floating around. We designed it maybe 15 years ago. I can't believe it's still functional, but it's out there. I bumped into it the other day.
That's funny. Yeah, I mean, like, just I remember taking an HTML class in 1998 when I was in college, just dating myself now. But yeah, and it was like, it was work. It was legwork. It was a strange language that made no sense, and you had to remember a lot of href such and such kind of acronyms to do anything. You couldn't just get a WordPress background and do like a simple site for yourself. But so
yeah,
part of what I find interesting about where we could take this conversation is the entrepreneurship. But as an entrepreneur, I'm sure have had to, because the idea of why people have a website or what they use it for has changed so much from 2004-5 to now, like the 20 plus years. And I'm curious to hear how you feel that you've had to maybe adjust the way that you take the value proposition of designing websites for people to market, or like how, where people see the value in paying for it or what they use it for.
Yeah. Well, it varies a lot from business to business and industry to industry. So for us, the trades, construction, industrial brands, it's about building trust and authority in the spaces they work, particularly for those larger projects. So we've got some clients who win most of their jobs through tendering process, government contracts and so on. So for them, it's not really about optimizing for Google and attracting people who are searching for them. That's not the way in which they gather leads and so on. So it's about building the authority and trust. So when they submit a proposal, then people will do their research because it's a massive investment oftentimes. They're going to look at their website and every other social signal that they can see to ensure they're making a good decision. That's an extreme example, but a lot of people are just trying to attract enough interest in the marketplace as well as at the opposite end of the spectrum. So they're really trying to optimize to get Google's attention, and Google's still the leading source of traffic for most of our clients' websites. Although it's changing, it's still the leading source. So search engines, but also, showing up in large language models these days as well. So the website is not there just to, it's there primarily for the human reader and user, but it's also a way to train AI about your company because they're gleaning information from far and wide online, and the website is the one space you have absolute control of, and you can dig a lot deeper than you might in social platforms, for example.
Yeah. I've heard, and I don't really know a lot about this, but I've heard that if, let's say, you did a whole bunch of stuff in your website like 10 years ago or even 5-6 years ago, that was, traditional SEO optimized so that Google would find it, that now that's not exactly obsolete, but it's not ideal, that you want to sort of take into account LLM searches, which are not keyword driven, but rather it's, logical inference driven from like mini sentences and phrases. Have you found that that's changed a lot of what you're proposing that people put in their website as a result?
Yeah, it's changed and for the better. I certainly think, because you had to try and not cheat your way to the top, but think about keywords in a really, it feels like an archaic way now. So people would search for the service or the product and the location, typically Plumber, Melbourne, for example. But now they understand the context of language, and so therefore you might search for a full sentence and backward and forward with a large language model, ChatGPT. So yeah, it's changing for the better because it's understanding context and nuance. And I think there was always different ways people would try and cheat their way to the top in the old methods. And what would happen? There would be a new hack or a cheat, and people would apply that, and then Google would realize, hey, people are cheating, and change the rules and sometimes penalize sites or blacklist them. All of those days are kind of over. I mean, there's probably little sneaky things people try, but it's not ethical. And I've never been in on that kind of game because, I would never want a client's website to be penalized. Yeah. And so while we always built slow and steady and incremental improvement, there was, I could see potential clients would sometimes choose someone who would get quicker results, but then they'd get smashed. And that was not the way I wanted to build a business and brand. I was just always really clear that this is going to take time, but it's going to last the distance. So,
yeah. And I think that really speaks to part of what you were talking about, even when we were just exchanging emails about this podcast, which I find you and I are very aligned on. Is, this is a podcast called Recruiting EQ, referring to emotional quotient, right? And using emotional intelligence, to me, in this era of AI, and particularly for me, it's from a recruiting or sales or, talent acquisition lens. But it's like there's never been a more important or valuable time, I think, to lean into it. Which a lot of people are going the other direction. A lot of people are like, oh yeah, AI can just replace humans for all these different things. I don't see it that way, and I think neither do you as well. And so I'd love to hear, even maybe on a high level, like how does the human intelligence or like emotional intelligence factor in for you, and how have you seen that evolve over the years?
Yeah, well, I feel as though I mean, it's still early days for AI, but I feel as though it's the only key distinction that we'll bring to the table eventually. I mean, the tech piece, we build websites, so the tech piece is only going to get easier. So if you were to think that, our service offering would just be programming, well, that will soon be near redundant to a large degree. So what other value can we possibly bring to the table? And that's our emotional intelligence and our understanding of people and how we can guide decision making. Because when you live in a world of abundance of software opportunities and technology opportunities, how do you possibly even choose the best one for your circumstances at the right time? And so it takes a human understanding and connection to help guide and navigate through these times. There's probably a series of good options on the table, and how do you choose the best one? That's going to be hard. So relating to people, understanding their uniqueness, their distinctions, even drawing out some of their key distinctions has been incredibly important for me. It's almost like more of a coaching, sort of consulting side of the business these days that I'm really leaning into. I love people, so that's my natural persuasion anyway. But the way I see it is, if you don't have that aspect as a high priority in your business, you'll just be bland and the same as everybody else, and you really will be vulnerable to be wiped out by a AI platform if you bring nothing else to the table.
Yeah, and so I think that your perspective on that is really refreshing, because there's a lot of doom and gloom around design in particular, and whether it's like corporate design especially, but like websites, even creativity. I mean, even like people are under fire thinking, are artists going to disappear? Visual artists? Are films and TV shows made fully by humans in jeopardy in 5-10 years from now because the cost is so low? And if people are happy with AI made content, will there be an argument, or will prices have to go up? There's like a massive existential questions about a lot of stuff. Music, visual art, design is one of the big ones. And this has been your key business through a lot of change in tech. How is that hitting you, that whole wave of like, this is a big existential thing, and maybe from a business standpoint, a lot of people are going to be hit? Because you seem quite positive about it, and I love that.
Yeah, I'm positive about it because the human side is always what I'm being passionate about. I've always loved going to networking things and catching up with people and client meetings even, and podcasts. I get up super early in the morning sometimes, being on the other side of the planet to a lot of podcasts. So I love that sort of thing. So for me, just leaning into all of that is natural. And I think kind of trying to future-proof as best we can. Because as you say, I mean, designing websites, the design piece is getting easier as well. And obviously, as I said, the software piece is getting easier and easier. It always has, but obviously that's just accelerating, to a crazy pace right now. So I think every business will need to figure out how they can humanize their brand, and that, people will always connect through basic things like storytelling. Even like every culture throughout history, doesn't matter what part of the planet it was you were from, they had storytelling as part of their heritage and history. Certainly here in Australia, we have the Aboriginal, dream time that they would speak of, stories and learning, understanding the world. So I think we need to understand our businesses from that lens and context as well. How do we introduce story? How do we humanize? How do we be distinct in a world that's growing generic and bland? And I suppose the risk in that is some people you might alienate because they're not, for whatever reason, feeling a connection with you as a person, as a personal brand. But there will be others that gravitate toward you because they do feel that connection. So it's kind of putting yourself out there, thinking about the story and the way in which you show up as a human.
Yeah, you raised something very interesting there that I see a lot of as a recruiter, and currently a recruiter who is a rec to rec. So I speak to a lot of recruiters in my line of work and clients. I mean, I've been in sales for 20 plus years, right? And it's amazing to me the number of businesses that you speak to who can't really articulate their story or their like with what their differentiators are, like what uniquely sets them apart. And almost like they
Yeah.
don't really want to. Some people are a bit annoyed when you press them for this kind of thing. Like they're like, just go do your job and find me somebody. Like, what's wrong with you? Which is sad and unfortunate. But I feel
Yeah.
like that's gonna get harder for them to attract people because, to your point, a lot of everyone has these AI tools at their fingertips for very low cost.
Mm.
So a lot of things are going to become sort of samey, right? Like in terms of the level of work that can be done quickly and cheaply. So like
Mm.
it's going to be like what's going to set you apart has to come down to who you are as an individual. I mean, humans are unique, you know, businesses are not. There's this gap that I think needs to be filled there that I think some people are very on top of and others are not remotely interested in having a chat about now.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that talking to your clients? Like, do you feel like you're taking them on this journey of self-discovery sometimes, or do they often come to you saying, this is who we are, this is what I need in my website, go, you know what I mean?
Yeah, there's different ways of tackling it. So for what I've found is to try and draw out those key points of distinction that make them human is, in my world, it feels as though if we have a venting session almost, and it's something I kind of learned from studying psychology a few years
Mhm.
back. I was having a pretty dark time, so studying different ways of viewing the world in psychology, and shadow work became something I was really interested in
Yeah,
at the time. But to think about the darkness, because all of us have an aspect of darkness, but to understand that, it just makes the light so much more obvious and brighter. So I discovered, thinking that through, I thought, well, sometimes it's really difficult to glean stuff out of, construction-based businesses. They're really pragmatic, practical, down to earth, as I said before. But they do like to vent because it's high pressure. They might be out
yeah,
on sites, and you know, people are always complaining. It's just a high pressure industry. So to have them vent about all the frustrations and the things that they don't like, and even the, bitching about their competitors potentially. Now, this is a
right.
private conversation behind closed doors, but people open up on an emotional level in those conversations far more easily than to come to them and say, "Hey, what makes you distinct in the marketplace?" or
Yeah,
what's your key points of difference? Those sorts of things. Or we can quickly find those out when they start telling me what they don't like in the industry and what the competitors are doing wrong. So just cracking people open in different ways, getting inside their head. I found that's a really good lever to pull. I don't tell them the backstory of what I'm doing, of
sure.
shadow work and all that sort of stuff, but that's that's just the method of what I've come to understand as part of being human. People emotionally spill a lot of information once they start thinking about that side of the coin.
It's a really good point, and I think a lot of people avoid having difficult conversations, or they think, "Well, we're here to to hide that stuff or not talk about it." But I mean, for them to get comfortable enough to open up about things that they're upset about, or that they're think their competitors are doing wrong, or like vent a little bit, or get let out those frustrations. There's like a trust and a comfort that needs to get built first. That again, I
Yeah,
hesitate to think that if they were doing this online or with an AI, program like through any kind of what's the one I'm thinking of right now, Fiverr or whatever, you know what I mean? And getting a design,
yeah,
they're not going to get a design that incorporates that, or I think almost like you
yeah,
need another human to help you see who you are sometimes, like to reflect it back at you in a way that makes sense.
yeah. Definitely, you just don't see things so clearly when it's your own baby, your own businesses,
Yeah,
particularly. But even as an employee, if you're leading a marketing team, it's so hard to have perspective because you're inside of it. You always need external perspective, and I think that's why niching will become more and more important, because you grow in your level of knowledge for that particular field, and so you can bring a higher level of insight because you've seen other things that are similar that might work in their context as well. So and it is interesting, you touch on something interesting. There's different personalities, and some people just want to go do their job and don't want to talk about it too much. And
it's true.
I mean, I'm not a recruiter, but I've always considered team in that different personalities. Those types of people were great because you could give them a repetitive task and they just do it 9 to 5 or whatever and go home. And that's kind of suited to them because they're not trying to grow, they're not trying to expand, but they're just doing the stuff that needs to be done. That might be bland and boring, but they're happy to do that and go home. I always built team with some of that kind of, some people in that sort of space and some that are more driven and trying to break new ground and do exciting things. But I feel as though those data-driven kind of like not data-driven, but the mundane task-oriented person might be a little bit vulnerable in the future because they're the jobs that are going to go. I think all of us need to be almost an entrepreneurial mindset, to have an entrepreneurial mindset to think about what's changing, what's the trajectory, where's the opportunities, where's the gaps, how do we adjust our skill sets to make the most of those opportunities. It's going to be interesting.
It is, and I think you're totally right. Like there's, to a large extent, a lot of people have been discouraged even from being too much themselves or having too much of an emotional reaction to what's going on and just kind of get on with it and do their daily tasks for years, for decades, right? And now here we are saying, oh yeah, if you want to be relevant in the next 5 to 10 years, you got to find a way to be yourself. You can't hide behind just mundane tasks. You got to bring your humanity to the table. But I mean, like, okay, for some people that's perhaps easier than others. Like I've always been in sales, so it's not that hard, right? It's not a big lift. But if you aren't that person, then this is probably a pretty big puzzle to figure out, well, okay, well, who am I in that context at work? What do I enjoy, or what am I good at doing that isn't going to be just getting it done and moving on? That's what I'm doing, and I'm happy doing that, like you're saying, and not having to bring a lot of my personal self and personality to the table at work. And now you're saying I kind of have to do that, and unfortunately, I'm personally, I think you're right. You almost have to be a little entrepreneurial about it and think about your personal brand at almost every level of every company, in my head anyways, where I think that, the humanity piece will have to fit in. How do you feel about that evolution?
Yeah, it's 100% right. It's you've got to think about, I mean, even the way people will, you're an employee, I haven't been an employee for a long time, but by observation, you can see that people change career paths super fast. And the one thing you take from job to job is your personal brand, and that's it's not hidden anymore. It's not just in your resume. It's across your social media, particularly LinkedIn being more of a professional platform. I would say every employee, like even if you never want to set out on your own entrepreneurial endeavor, your LinkedIn profile should at least be reasonably polished and up to date, because that's where people are looking these days.
Well, yeah, for sure. And then let's talk about your client base a little bit, Wes. They're coming to you then? Are they finding you by searching, or are you also? I know you mentioned going to networking events and so on. Do you have someone doing sales for you, or are you doing it yourself, or how does it work?
Yeah, I do all the sales myself. That's my key role. So yeah, there's a constant flow of leads coming through online, as you'd hope for a company like ours. I used to do a lot of networking events. I've dialed it back a fair bit, but I'm keen to get some more because I enjoy them. It's just the time factor, It's really difficult to get to a lot because that. The late in the evening. I've been spending a fair bit of time on the podcast. I've started my own podcast and guesting as well. So they're often early mornings. And so the late evening networking has taken a back seat for the time being. But anything that's human facing and human connection, that's what I'm focused on. So I may choose to dial back the amount of guest podcasts I do in the future and get back into rooms with people. I think that there's so many benefits of being in a room full of people with similar goals and objectives to you. But firstly, you're growing your brand awareness and your personal brand, but also you can learn so much when you're in the right room with the right people.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I feel like face to face is coming back into fashion slowly but surely, at least with salespeople anyway, where you just notice the difference. Like you notice it and you're like, oh, heck, why did we get away from this? Oh, yes, COVID. But, but now the COVID's
Yeah,
not keeping us in. Like there's a huge benefit to at least some moderate amount of face to face.
yeah.
What about your podcast? Let's plug your podcast a little bit here. Where can people listen to your podcast? What's it called?
Yeah, Built, Trusted, Chosen is the show. You'll find it everywhere good podcasts are.
Aha.
The, yeah, most listening. So, and my assumption is because it's for trades, construction related people who are often on site and traveling from site to site. My best guess is they're listening while they're driving around during their days. The videos, not many views. That's fine. Yeah, it is interesting to see. I only started this year. I started out guests doing what I'm doing here, and just found I love that so much that I thought, oh, this will stretch me a little further to host, which is a completely different beast. Still learning. One day will be as good as you, Rick. In the
Well,
way
I
I
don't know,
host.
man. Thank you. That's very flattering. I am still learning as well, and trying to figure this whole thing out. How have you found it in terms of like the benefit of doing the podcast from a BD perspective? Something that I get asked a lot as well. How do you feel that it's been going in that sense, and how do you use it for BD even?
Yeah, certainly it's opened up exposure for sure, and some really really good projects have come through as a result. Curiously, they were probably the best client we won through it just recently. I don't think she'd ever listened to a full podcast, but she'd bumped into a whole bunch of reels and I'm not sure what platform she was using, but because if you engage with something, then you get more and more of it. So all of a sudden, she was seeing my little face on her phone all the time, talking about exactly what she needed. So it just became obvious that I at least was on the radar to do the proposal and won that job. And after speaking to her further about it, our price was actually a fair bit higher than the other proposal. Well, I think there might have been another couple of proposals, but the other one they were closely considering. But I think what got me across the line was, all that information that I am who I say I am, and I do what we say we do. And
yeah,
there was that level of trust built just by engaging with the podcast material, even though it wasn't in the podcast form. She may have listened to a full show. I'm not sure, but certainly she mentioned the socials.
Yeah, I think the reels are great that way. Like, it's funny that even though people know that the algorithm does that in the back of their mind, it still works to make it seem like you're everywhere. I will get that
Yeah.
sometimes if people have engaged with a couple, and I'm like, my God, you're everywhere. How are you doing this? And I'm like, I just sort of take credit for it silently. But of course, we all know that that's just how the algorithm works. I'm not doing anything different.
Yeah.
But if you engage with it, it gives you more of the things that you liked or whatever.
Yeah.
But it does a big favor there. But that to me has been the biggest thing too, right? Is the humanization factor. It's not like we need everybody to sit and listen to every episode start to end in order for them to sort of see that we're humans. And I think we buy from people that we relate to and we like and so on and feel that we're aligned with. So the humanization element of it, I think, is powerful. And I think whether it's podcasts or something else, that element of it, I think, is going to go up in popularity for what people are doing versus like sequenced emails and all this. Are you seeing that as well? Do you think the sort of, you know what I mean, being yourself out there is the key?
Yeah, and I've started thinking, so for many years we were thinking about the sales funnel, and even having online funnels to grow your business, and the concept being you bring in leads and eventually whittle them down to be a client customer. But I don't like to think of it in a funnel anymore. I like to think of it more of some people might call it a flywheel, but it's more cyclical, and it's because people can enter into your world in so many different ways.
Yeah,
it's not as if it's anything close to linear. They're bumping into your material on socials, and then maybe they get some emails, and maybe they see you at a networking event. And there's just so many different pieces of the puzzle that come together for them in their own unique way. So I like to think of it more of a cycle. And also with the funnel process, it kind of creates a customer, but that realistically should not be the end. Your customers and clients should be your best salespeople. And what I mean by that is they should be referring you, and they should be telling all their friends and family about the awesome service product you've provided. So to think about them in that way, you've got to go above and beyond to make sure they're satisfied and more than satisfied. They've become a raving fan. So the thinking of it as a sales funnel as a linear process just didn't do that for me. So I'm thinking of it more of a cycle. How do we create an exceptional experience so that becomes more work? Because, trust is eroded online. We don't trust what we read. We don't trust what we see with the videos. We don't know if they're even the people that they purport to be. So,
seriously,
the actual word of mouth from real people, you've got to leverage that trust.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. Let me ask you this too, Wes. What are your clients looking for when they come to see you in terms of results and ROI? Are they just like, listen, we have to do a rebrand because it's getting stale, or we have a new owner? Or is it like, we have this sales target, or we're trying to get this new market, or so on? Like, is it overtly a sales ROI they're looking for out of the website, or what are the problems they're bringing to you to solve?
Not as much. Sometimes it will be that specific in terms of they just need more leads and conversions into real business. But it's usually a combination of that and just the trust signals that they know people are going to Google stalk them. They're going to check them out online as much as they can. So they want all bases covered and look professional. And it's usually a combination somewhere of a hybrid of those. Some of the bigger clients, it's all about brand. So they're not really worried about gathering leads through the website, but others on the smaller end of the spectrum are probably typically the ones who are looking for more leads. So there's a couple of different problems that might be meaning they're not getting enough leads, that not enough eyeballs on the website. So traffic is a big one, or the website isn't designed in a manner that is for conversion optimization. So sometimes it's a combination. Sometimes it's obvious one is more of a problem than the other. So working on those pieces of the puzzle that are going to bring the best outcomes is the art to what we do. Because typically people are working to some form of limited budget. So they've got to spend their money wisely to get that return on investment.
Yeah, exactly. And it's unclear, I think, to a lot, or not unclear. It's really different depending who I ask, where their website fits in to their company in terms of what priority it is, what it's really used for. Is it really just a jumping off point to getting meetings, or is it supposed to provide a lot of information, or you know what I mean? I think it became mandatory at some point in the 2000s to have a good website, and I think they got really dense for every company for a little while, and now people, it seems, to streamline them down. What do you think, in all the context that we're talking about, what do you think or advise that a future forward kind of thing, a habit would be in terms of thinking about your website?
Yeah, there's two truths that feel as though they're polar opposites. The tension in those truths is where it really matters, in that your main pages of your website should be clear, concise, compelling, all geared around thinking about the next logical step. So the call to action. What do you want someone to do as a result of bumping into that web page? And every page should have its own unique objectives. So they're clear, concise, compelling for those very reasons. But then you also want lots of content-rich information, because that's what Google love and large language models love as well. And not that anyone is going to read all of it, but the right information will surface to the right people at the right time when they're using various tools, whether they're Googling or they're on ChatGPT, for example. So that content, the substantial content, might be through a blog, is the typical way we do it. You don't need to call it blog. It might be insights or news, whatever you want to do, but it's that fresh, unique content published regularly. that really fuels what's going on online to a deeper degree. Because social media, it's just a kind of a snippet. It's there and it's gone. And it's kind of think about it in the same way in social media. If you engage with something, you'll get more of it. Only the right information is surfacing to the right people at the right time. So you haven't got to worry if a particular blog post is something, you perceive to be boring. If you're a plumber and you're fixing pipes, plumbing issues in a bathroom, let's say, then that might be boring for most people, but it's not boring for that person who needs plumbing in their bathroom because something's leaking right there and then. That's incredibly interesting information because it's got a need. So you just rely upon the tools that are getting better and better to give that to the right people at the right time. So you haven't got to worry about having too much in the blog kind of format. But so that's why I say there's kind of two truths: the clear, concise, compelling, direct message on your main pages, but then the substantial, deep insights in your news, and then you're covering both bases.
Yeah, that's fascinating to me because, to your point, I think a lot of people think that the content needs to be compelling, like it would be a compelling read that you yourself would read and feel like, wow, that was great, that was super well written, or like, what I mean, snappy in some way. But the necessity to get it out regularly and to have it full of that rich information is probably going to compel a lot of people to use AI to help them write the posts. So there's this bizarre feedback loop, right? Where it's like, I'm using AI to write posts regularly, whether I want to or not, in order to train AI to find my website for the people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it is an interesting thing. And so the temptation with that is you're not actually adding anything new to the table because you're just regurgitating what everyone else has already published. So you really want to think about information gain. What are you adding to the world, to the big internet? That's uniquely something that's distinctly yours. So it's easy wins to think about it that way is case studies and stories or examples that things you've actually worked on. For us, for construction businesses, we had a new client come on board a couple of months ago who'd worked on some phenomenal buildings, and I had no idea. I just thought they were a small player in Sydney. And then they started telling me about the projects that we worked on, and some of the buildings are, certainly recognised all around Australia, but probably some of them globally, people would know those buildings. And I thought, man, that's such a goldmine. You can talk about these case studies or stories. Imagine the photographs of those, and they've just got to publish it. They've just got to put it out there. And that's true information gain because only they can say they built that thing. And,
exactly.
Yeah. And so even if it's not, you're not at that level and you're just doing basic local work that isn't really like globally recognized, it's still valuable because it's still other people with that same need would like to see it in action. They can see you've done it before and to a satisfactory level and hopefully a great level, it can be really beneficial.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting to me too. I want to go back to the comment you made about shadow work and talking to clients and sort of getting them to open up, even if they're venting about this stuff, and not having them shy away from the problems, the difficulties, the things that bother them as a way in to sort of break into them. Do you feel that, like, once they've opened up, do you feel like it helps you design the website, how it should look, how it should feel in particular, I guess, is what I'm curious about?
Yeah, so it just highlights to me really quickly what's important to them, and it might only be a couple of little highlights that you can kind of glean from a big conversation like that. But realistically, the only things you need to communicate through your marketing is those little pieces of the puzzle that make you distinct. It might be, you might be really strict on time, showing up on time. You might really, and so you'll be complaining about, people being late and all that sort of thing, and say, okay, well, time is important to this person, so showing up on time or leaving the site tidy. as you can imagine, people working in construction, particularly like renovation style of work or working in home services, working in people's homes, there's the potential for things to go wrong if presentation isn't done right. People want to trust the people that they're in their homes. So these little aspects which might not feel that great, they can make all the difference. So highlighting those in the marketing message, can make a real difference.
Yeah, and from a recruitment perspective, I rarely, for a little while there, I was not really excited about sharing candidates the websites of the companies that I was promoting. This is going back years now. Now it's gotten a lot better, but for a little while there, everybody's website had started to look and sound the same, like maybe 10 years ago. And it was like, okay, let me check out their website and see if I'm interested in them as a company. And I just always was holding back, like a good decade ago, from saying, it's not going to tell you anything. It looks exactly like the company you're at right now. It looks like every competitor. It's not, you know what I mean? It's really not. It uses the same buzzwords and whatever. So clearly we had past this peak where websites were they were just necessary and people were just phoning it in for SEO, and that was it. And I hope that now that's kind of going away in a big way, right? Because even from, and I don't know if companies think about this, right? But even for attracting talent and retaining talent, do you know what I mean? You've got to stand out. If I'm going to show somebody 5 companies and they're looking to leave, and there's one that really speaks to them, that could be it. That could be the differentiator that makes them choose to go there, and maybe they end up being like a VP or a president of the company in 20 years. You know what I mean? Like it could be a big game changer.
Yeah. I saw a big shift to websites being designed around attracting the right team members, when there was a really massive shortage of labor type workers and construction workers. We had a massive shortage here in Australia. So it was the very first time that I saw a few websites where they started thinking about it from the lens of potential employees wanting to come work with them. So it was a really interesting shift, because it was always, before then, it was easy to get new staff and so on. It was never a massive problem, so they didn't have to focus on it. But once there was a shortage, things changed quite a lot. It's probably moderate now, but the career path, the career page, those sorts of things became important for a little while there.
Yeah, I think I think it's something that is overlooked in certain industries. I mean, hopefully not so much in construction that it's a big gap, but certainly I feel like it's overlooked, right? That it's like, this isn't just for clients to find you. It's also to make sure that you're attracting the right people who are going to be happy and thrive in your environment and choose you correctly.
Yeah. I did an electrician's website a little while ago, and he just had job openings on there, and they were just generic because he's always looking for people. But I think he updates the date from time to time. He can post them himself. But yeah, always looking for a Sparky. We call them Sparkies here in Australia. We've got lingo for everything. So it's a good way of thinking about it. Just having the job opening, and even if it's always open, you're always looking for the right people. That's an interesting way of thinking about it.
Yeah, but see, I think that's certainly in North America, that's frustrating people. Some people have been doing that for so long and not hiring that now everyone's like, oh my god, this isn't even a real job. I've applied twice, or I had an interview and then we didn't, and I spoke to someone else, it was the same thing. So I feel like it was a tactic for a little while, but even now in some markets anyway, it's created a lack of trust because people are like, this is just always happening, and you know what I mean? And so like they'll talk to each other about it. The frustrated candidates start a little negative whisper campaign about you.
Yeah, those things are frustrating. My partner's, she's looking to change location for her job. It's the same job, but apparently because it's government, you have to go through a whole process of putting it out there for other people to apply. But realistically, they're going to hire her. How frustrating for those that are applying without, knowing that probably the job's sewn up for her anyway,
Yeah.
Does that happen over there as well?
Absolutely. In Canada, especially, I think that, well, anywhere that has sort of regulation where if you're, in Canada, if you're a publicly traded company, or there's a whole bunch of guidelines, like you have to post it to the public, even if you have an incumbent candidate. So there's all this cynicism, right? Just like, I guess this isn't real either. Let's just throw our resume to the void anyway. Like,
Yeah, yeah. The unintended consequences of policies and so on. It's just
yeah,
what
for
happens.
sure.
Yeah.
For sure. So in our last stretch here, I tend to go even further down the rabbit hole of big concept on this. What do you think, as someone who's in design, what do you think of the uncanny valley? The concept of the uncanny valley with AI. Do you guys talk about this in Australia as sort of
No, tell me what that is.
So it's the term in North America that they have assigned to the feeling that's a little off-putting when AI creates an image or art or a design or whatever and tries to just do it for you fully. When you prompt it, and that gap between when a person does it, it can feel right, and when AI does it, even when it gets the elements right, there's something off about it. Obviously, sometimes it just puts a whole bunch of eyeballs in the wall or something like that, and then that's clearly creepy, right? That's a clear tentacles on people's faces. But even when it gets it right, there's something missing. There's a coldness, or there's no real je ne sais quoi, or whatever word to say it. And so they've coined this phrase relatively recently, a year or so ago, called the uncanny valley between what the image is and how we feel about it looking at it.
Yeah. Well, there's a real resistance, isn't there, when we feel as though something isn't genuine or authentic, and that's probably what people are experiencing. So sometimes, even if something's super polished or perfect, we don't trust it anymore. I think, to think about what we're doing right now, people will know it's real because unless you use the editing tool to take out every single and pauses that are not natural. I think that just the craving for the authentic. My daughter, she's in school, about to turn 14, but the teachers will tell her not to use AI. But the homework that's given, all the links and references have ChatGPT in that, because ChatGPT sometimes stumps their little in the end of the URL. So she knows, hey, they're using AI to create the homework, but we're not allowed to use it to answer the homework, which is a funny thing. So there's this pushback, I think, of just trust. And I think the imperfect is it's an element that humanizes things. It's almost like that Japanese pottery where they put the gold in the cracks. It's making the imperfections the feature, which is an interesting way of looking at it. How do we do that? How do we apply that to a business context, so we don't come out generic and bland and not quite meeting the mark?
I think that's a wonderful analogy. I love that, the whole Japanese pottery with the gold cracks kind of thing. For the shadow work, I think that's a great wrap up. And at the end of the day, I guess all of this highlights really that even with design or with anything else, it's not so much how it looks in the end, right? It's how it feels. Does it feel right? Does it feel? Yeah. Do people feel something when they see it that isn't just unsettled, like they're looking at a tentacle person?
Yes.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much for this, Wes. It was a great conversation. As you can tell, I could talk about this all day, but we are out of time pretty much. So we'll have you back on in the future and have a further chat. But for the time being, can you let everybody know where they can find you online if they would like to keep the conversation going or hire you guys on?
Yeah, uplift360.com.au, and don't let the AU deter you. If you did jump on there, you'll see a whole bunch of brands we've worked with from all around the world, probably some you might recognize as well. So on there, you can book a strategy call with me directly. So big button on the homepage there.
Awesome. Thank you, Wes. And thank you, everybody, for tuning into this. You can get Recruiting EQ everywhere as you find your podcasts. And if for some reason you find your podcast somewhere that does not have Recruiting EQ, DM me on LinkedIn and let's figure out what the heck's going on there. Thanks a lot, everybody. And we'll see you next episode.